Are we sure this is a good idea? Blake asked, not for the first time. He checked the battery of his flashlight again. I'm at 30%. If we're stranded here in the dark, we'll have to get back out without light. You realize that, right? Of course, Arda agreed. It's only natural for batteries to slightly be depleted of power when in use, after all. Is that a joke? Arda was about to deny it when Jong-woo cut in. I'm at 40%. We'll be fine, and we're close. He stopped for a moment and pointed his flashlight at a spot on the stone wall. Since he'd been taking the lead, both of them had to stop. The Imperialist traced a finger over the symbol on the stone before looking back and nodding. They continued. The carved symbol was something like a circus ring, swathed in majestic, dramatic flames, and a flowing ribbon weaving in and out of it. It had no color, but Arda didn't need any to know that it was a symbol of the Imperial Ring of the East. It felt like too much of a coincidence. Symbols of the Imperialists here in North Cove, where a drifter for the Imperialists were supposed to be. Arda had Jong-woo look at it, who confirmed and brought up the idea that they should follow it down. Flashlights that had seemingly appeared out of nowhere were turned on as they trudged down the long passageway, which seemed to spiral down and down for kilometers. Somewhere along the way, it turned into a staircase. The air wasn't as close as above ground, not that it meant much. There wasn't the wind constantly tearing at them or the snow trying to bury them alive every second. The stone walls were like ice, but they helped trap the heat inside. It was also utterly pitch dark, save for the beams from their flashlights. However, it didn't stay that way for long. Light suddenly appeared in the stairwell, coming from below, and without a word or a glance, the three of them all hurried down. Soon, the stairs ended, and they arrived at something that was like a cavern, but the four walls were perfectly smooth, the floor and ceiling free of any jagged stones or edges, apart from a perfectly smooth, hollow half-cylinder in the middle of the place. It was more like a basement, and it would have been if there weren't openings on opposite sides of the walls. If Arda's sense of direction was right, it opened out towards the east and west. A tunnel led out from there, less like it was man-made and more natural. An underground river rushed through the whole basement, through the indentation on the ground, and back into the tunnel, eastward, toward the ocean. It was amazing how the whole place hadn't collapsed from the earthquake, though perhaps it was deep enough to sustain it. The room was empty except for the river and another thing, on the corner opposite the stairwell. It was large, its texture and color deceiving. Jong-woo's flashlight beam traced the river before moving to the thing. Blake stepped closer to the rushing river and crouched next to it, looking up and down with his flashlight. Arda went and stopped next to the river to inspect what seemed to be a giant block of ice, glinting in the flashlight's beam. It was vaguely oblong, with rounded edges and a cool, slippery exterior. The main body was 2 meters tall, around 4 meters long, and 3 meters wide. It was about the size Arda had imagined. If it had been in the ocean with the drifting ice and left there, no one would have expected a thing until they inspected it up close and found that it was thicker than a natural, typical ice drifting in the ocean should be. Here, in the dim, dark basement, several dozen meters underground, perhaps even more, another thing that set it apart from a normal block of ice were the legs that supported the drifter. 4 of them in total, one extended in each direction and held the vehicle up a few inches from the ground. Well, this is it, Jong-woo said, stepping over the river as well. Blake looked up, his flashlight beam joining the Imperialists. Come on, let's get the others. As if waiting for that moment, Blake's flashlight went out. Arda heard a commotion and deduced that the former North Sphere had jumped in fright. It was backed up by a small squeak in this general direction. The light shifted and fell on Blake, who was shaking the little device in his hand, muttering incessant things at the chemistry behind batteries draining faster in the cold. Shoot, Blake muttered, He looked up. Zhanglu, your flashlight. With impeccable timing, the older man's flashlight flickered before it died as well. Zhanglu cursed loudly. Hey! Blake's voice came from the pitch dark. No cussing in front of kids. The blonde proceeded to curse, twice as loud as him. Arda sighed. He slowly walked over to the drifter, a hand outstretched. It landed on a cool surface as he walked a full circle around it. He'd only been on a drifter once, and he had no idea how it worked. If he could just find something to get inside. We need to get the drifter out of here, and we're not going up the steps, Arda said, frowning in the dark. Maybe it was because he knew that no one could see him, not in this situation, but he felt that he didn't have to school his expression all the time. Plus, Blake didn't need to know. Can we bring the others down here? John Woo's voice asked. It'll be easier, and they need to get out of the storm. They haven't felt warmth in days. Saguang is losing hope. Saguang? Arda knew who that was. A young girl in the platoon, only around 16. She was the newest member and the youngest. It was no wonder her perseverance weren't as strong as the others. As for how he knew, well, he might have eavesdropped just a little. It's too dark, Arda pointed out, and the walk might make it worse. We had to bring the drifter to them. The Imperialists must have found a way to get in here somehow, Blake said. Arda heard a step, before there was a loud splash from the river. Blake spluttered and cursed. I forgot about the river! Blake! Arda turned his head, before remembering that he couldn't see anything anyway. Are you alright? Are you worried about me? Blake shouted, for no reason at all. Also, yes, kind of. Cold! The river must have been how they got it up here, John was suggested, completely ignoring Blake's misery as he walked up to the drifter as well. Arda heard Jong-woo's breathing pick up. A faint blue glow appeared next to the drifter as it shook slightly, as if he was climbing it. It faded as soon as it appeared. There was the scraping of something like metal on metal, and then suddenly the room was filled with light. Blake yelped, and Arda shielded his eyes, unused to the brightness, before lowering it slightly. From the bottom of the drifter, blue light emitted from unseen panels, filling the basement, like in the ocean. Arda looked up and saw John Woo crouched on the top of the drifter, his head inside the vehicle, before he sat up and beckoned to both Arda and Blake. His eyes were set with determination as he took off his hat and goggles. We've been down here too long. Let's go. Arda quickly walked over to help Blake first, who was climbing out of the river where he'd misstepped and fallen. Dripping wet, he climbed the drifter with the help of John Woo and tumbled through the sliding door at the top, shivering the entire way. Oh, it's warm in here, thank goodness. Arda flew up the side of the drifter using his magnetic wristband and his boots that he, embarrassingly enough, forgot about. He usually didn't forget things like this. He wasn't so sure about developing a personality if this was what came with it. Dropping into the drifter after the older man, who closed the door behind him, he made a sweep of the interior. A similar setup to the Northsphere's drifter, but the Imperialist logo was stamped everywhere and painted onto the wall. The crates were stacked up against the back wall. Benches lined the sides. A corner was partially sectioned off with a curtain that could be drawn, and another corner had a sink and an oven-like structure. Cabinets lined the space above the benches, set against the ceiling, and the cockpit was separated by a wall with a sliding door, which John Woo was hurrying into. Arda heard him flicking on switches and pressing buttons, muttering under his breath. We can get into the river from here, can we? Blake called to the front. He was digging in the cabinets, standing on the benches. Yes, it's built to be able to travel short distances on large floating sea ice. It'll be even easier. You're going to fall, Arda said to Blake blatantly. He was also searching for something. A thermal blanket, which he assumed was the same thing the blonde was looking for. He'd given the one he got 5 days ago to the Imperialist, seeing as they needed it more. But now that Blake went ahead and got himself wet again in the freezing river, they needed another. By any chance, when are you going to keep yourself safe and not at risk of hypothermia? Blake made a loud aha and pulled out a blanket that looked to be in relatively good condition, and was just sending Arda an incredulous and offended look when he lost his balance and fell backwards. He yelped, as Arda was suddenly by his side and caught him in his arms before he could hit the ground. Oh, look at that! Blake grinned and tapped Arda's chest with the back of his knuckles. You did grow a heart. Last time I remember you just let me fall to the ground from the couch. Ack! Arda raised an eyebrow and dropped in the rest of the way. At least he wasn't cracking his head on the floor. Jerk! I got it moving, Jungwoo called back from the cockpit. Simultaneously, the drifter suddenly hummed to life and began moving. There were round windows in the main cabin, but all were closed, so Arda couldn't see what was going on outside. Be careful not to fall. I'm going full speed down the river. Arda grabbed another thermal blanket he'd found tucked away and threw it at Blake. Because you'll probably give away that one too, Arda answered his confused, blank stare, before sitting down firmly as the drifter started down the underwater river violently.